The Benjamin Dixon Show is only possible with listener support. Go to www.thebenjamindixonshow.com to register for our blog and join the Progressive Army. And now, ladies and gentlemen,
You're now about to witness the truth.
It's the Benjamin Dixon Show.
Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to the Benjamin Dixon Show. I am, of course, your host, Benjamin Dixon. It is Tuesday, December 27, 2016. Thank you so much for joining us. Always a pleasure to have you on board. Sorry for the delay, and actually there's going to be about an hour delay for the radio audience. So we'll get you, or the podcast audience, we'll get you the audio after the fact. I apologize. But considering 99.999% of you listen the very next morning, I don't think we're going to lose too much with not having the live stream. So I apologize for not having the live stream for the podcast, but, you know, the show must go on. It's probably because I was playing video games on the same laptop earlier today for about an hour and a half, and probably blew an audio driver or something like that. But I digress. So much happening in the news. We'll get to all that. Of course, I want to thank my patrons, without whom I could not do the Benjamin Dixon Show. Thanks so much for supporting us. Even those who can't support us financially, I want to thank you for just subscribing and being a part of the Progressive Army ecosystem, man. We're actually growing and doing a lot of fun things that we'll be able to update you on probably as early as like tomorrow, if not next week. But special thanks to Will and Nathan, who both became patrons overnight. You are part of the family now. Thanks so much. You can get access to our Friday bonus show, which there will be a full Friday bonus show on this Friday. Despite the holiday, we'll be here. And there will be Politics and Grits on this Sunday, albeit it won't be live. We will record it and make sure that you have your dose of politics and grits on this Sunday morning. All right, where do I start? Well, the first thing on my list here is white genocide. So let's start there. Last night we talked about the Drexel, and I kept saying Drexler, but forgive me, I'm thinking about Clyde Drexler. But anyway, we talked extensively about the professor, George Kerosene, I can't even pronounce his last name at this point, the professor who tweeted out, "All I want for Christmas is white genocide." And we discussed it pretty much from the angle of it doesn't exist. And I realized that's only half of the story. The other half of the story is that if it does exist, it exists in a form that, well, let me explain. We discussed it yesterday. The definition of white genocide is not that is carried by white nationalists, right? Neo-Nazis. I mean, go have a conversation with them. They will tell you plain as day that what they consider to be white genocide is the mixing of the races and interracial marriage, right? And children, having children that are not pure white, and having this happen as a result of integration, and having this happen at an accelerated pace. This is why whenever you see advertisements from people like State Farm, who showed this black guy giving a ring to his fiance, if she said yes, fiance. The comment section was riddled with people discussing white genocide. So it's not really white genocide from the true definition of genocide. Absolutely, 100% does not exist. But how they've defined genocide, which means like the slow, gradual end of the white race because of interracial mixing of the races. Does that happen? Yes. Is that genocide? No. And I'm amazed at the co-opting of language, not so much for the sake of saying that they co-opted, right? But I'm amazed at how sensitive and special snowflakes these people are with regard to, black people marrying white people or Hispanic people marrying white people, and then the overall browning. Because I mean, it's not our fault, right? It's not our fault that if you mix, you mix some black with some white, you're gonna get brown. It's not our fault that our melanin is dominant. That's your fault. No, it's not your fault either. It's just, but they're so sensitive about the idea of their race gradually disappearing and becoming brown that they termed it genocide, and it became a thing that is promulgated by neo-Nazis and white supremacists. I mean, the reality of it is over time, yes, I mean, you're going to have the overall average person is going to look brown if we're talking about the distant future, right? That's going to happen. But to use the word genocide in that context really signifies how butthurt some of these people get, right? How deeply rooted their disdain for other races really is, because they fear the thing they fear the most, or what they compare to genocide, is seeing their sister bring home, a Hispanic dude for Christmas. That's genocide to them. And in that regard, does it exist? I mean, no, it's still a ridiculous definition in usage of the word, right? There's real genocide that has taken place historically, arguably continues to take place. And to see this professor go through all the stuff the shitstorm that he's going through, because he's going through quite a shitstorm over something that is, either way you define it, it's either complete bullshit, because there's no such thing as white genocide. There's not the mass killing of, ethnic cleansing of millions upon millions of white people. It doesn't exist in that regard. But then on the flip side, even if you take their definition, neo-Nazi definition of white genocide, which is the mixing of the races, like, how do you fall on the same side as neo-Nazis in this particular argument when their argument is against integration, against racial mixing, against interracial marriages? This is the most fascinating thing to me, that they have managed to position themselves in this conversation to be the victims, because they called it white genocide, and because then somebody used that word against them. It reminds me of the Christian persecution complex, right? In America, at least, there is no such thing as Christian persecution in America. Yet Christians use that label of persecution and use their backstory of being persecuted in the Bible as a means of complaining against anyone who has ideas that are not in line with their quote unquote Judeo-Christian values. In other words, they claim and they feign to be persecuted because they're no longer free to persecute. They claim to be oppressed because they're no longer allowed to be the oppressor. Same exact thing with white genocide. Same exact thing with the war on Christmas. Here we have an ever expanding Christmas holiday season that no longer goes from Black Friday to New Year's. It goes from Halloween to New Year's and a couple of days after New Year's. Yet we still feign as though there's some war on Christmas. Man, it's hot as hell. Let me take off this Dr. Who sweater. It's hot as fucking here. But that's what we're dealing with. That's what we're dealing with. And it's the same thing conceptually. And it exposes the complete ineptness and sensitivity, the weakness of people who claim white genocide. And don't feel bad. You're not by yourself, because when you talk about racial mixing, you have black people who claim that there's black genocide because they were mixing of races. It's not just white nationalists. You have all probably in every single race and ethnicity, you have people who claim that their race or their ethnicity is going to be erased from the planet because of racial mixing. So it's not just white people and white nationalists who cry about this, but they seem to be the most offended. Actually, no, I can say it better than that. They seem to be, for them to be in the dominant the majority in power, they seem to be the most concerned. I guess maybe because they have the most to lose, right? They have been the dominant, the most, the majority power in the world history, modern world history. They have been there, and so in their mind, they're descending from their high place on their hill. They're descending down to being equal with everyone else. And so, of course, like we talked about yesterday, whenever you bring parity, whenever you bring equality, the person who was oppressing everyone else automatically feels like they've been oppressed because everyone else is now equal and they can't oppress. It's just fascinating to me how this particular story has played out and how people have fallen on the side of the fears of white genocide, knowing full and damn well how white nationalists and neo-Nazis define their concept of white genocide is the most racist and vitriolic bile that you can find anywhere. Yet, because they've stamped the word genocide on it, they are now in the perfect position to play the victim. That victim card is a powerful thing, and I guess, white neo-Nazis didn't want to be left out, even though they were the ones doing the victimizing. 857-600-0518 if you want to join the conversation. We're just warming up. What else is on my list of things tonight? Let's talk about President Obama. Yeah, I know. I do my very best to handle President Obama with a certain amount of care, mainly because I know irrelevant. It doesn't matter. I'm not handling him with care tonight. Here's the thing. President Obama did two things. One I agree with partially, and the other one I think is just completely insane. So President Obama was on the Axe Files, which is a podcast by David Axelrod, who used to be a special assistant to President Obama. And on the Axe Files, he discussed two things that I want to mention here. Number one, he discussed the possibility or the likelihood that he would beat Donald Trump, and that he would beat Donald Trump if he had a chance to run for a third time. Primarily, he did it as a means of explaining why Hillary Clinton lost. I don't think he meant to do it that way. I don't think he meant to, I don't know. It came off as though he was soft attacking Hillary Clinton, pointing the finger at Hillary Clinton. And from that regard, I'm like, yeah, Hillary Clinton did drop the ball, and President Obama would not have made the same mistakes that Hillary Clinton made in this election. President Obama knows how to run a campaign. He knows how to connect with people. He would not have skipped Wisconsin, Illinois. He would not have skipped those traditionally blue states just because they're traditionally blue. He would not have made those same mistakes. So it's a possibility that he would have won. But I'm not sure I fully agree with that because mainly because this election really was about economics. And you don't get a chance to redo the last 8 years and that have been a purely neoliberal economic paradigm. I mean, with even Obamacare, his signature achievement was a handout to health insurance companies, right? So I don't know if he could have convinced America for the third time that he was serious about economic populism, which would have been the number one way to defeat Donald Trump, particularly in the Rust Belt states. I don't think he could have done it. But I do believe he would not have made the same mistakes as Hillary Clinton. And that's essentially the substance of his conversation with David Axelrod on the Axe Files. The other conversation that he had with David Axelrod was about Jeremy Corbyn. And this conversation was rather, well, let me just give you some snippets of what Obama actually said against Jeremy Corbyn. So he compares Corbyn to the GOP. And this is from The Guardian. I want to read a snippet of what they said. However, the outgoing president insisted that he didn't fear the Corbynization of the Democratic Party following this loss in November, partly because he thinks that the Democratic Party stayed pretty grounded in fact and reality. The Guardian goes on to say Obama indirectly compared the state of the Labor Party underneath Jeremy Corbyn to that of the Republican Party in the U.S., which he said had started filling up with all kinds of conspiracy theorizing. Yeah. So, of course, this was heard across the pond, and Jeremy Corbyn's spokesperson said this, quote, both Labor and U.S. Democrats will have to challenge power if they are going to speak for working people and change a broken system that isn't delivering for the majority. What Jeremy Corbyn stands for is what most people want: to take on the tax cheats, create a fairer economy, and fund a fully public NHS, build more homes, and stop backing illegal wars. And then they had this beautiful quote at the end, said, quote, for the establishment, those ideas are dangerous. For most of the people in Britain, they're common sense and grounded in reality. I got to give Jeremy Corbyn's office and spokesperson a round of applause. So here's where I'm not going to sugarcoat things with President Obama, because, I mean, he played his card here, right? He played his centrist. Centrism is good. And anything that's too far to the left or too far to the right are equivalent in his eyes, in the eyes of a neoliberal. They're the same, right? They're the same evil. They're both extreme. They're both ideologues. That, you know, so this is how he can simultaneously, not simultaneously, this is how he gets away with lumping Corbyn and the international left in general with the rabid right. Ideological polar opposites, but he uses this horseshoe theory, right? The horseshoe theory that says the left, the far left, and the far right are essentially the same, and the middle is the center. The center, that's the place that we want to be. And that's bullshit. I mean, there's no other way to mince. There's no words to mince here. That's complete, utter bullshit. And the reason it's bullshit is because American centrism, or even this third way global centrism, is so far from being centrist. It's so far to the right. It has the entire paradigm underneath which we've operated for the last 40 years is anything but the progressive. Talk to me about your economic policies. And when you look at the economic policies of Barack Obama and the third way Democrats, the Democratic Leadership Council, they have always leaned to the right, not just leaned to the right. They have gone as far to the right as they could and still get away with being called Democrats economically. This is how you get this entire generation of Democrats who say, I'm socially liberal, but I'm fiscally conservative, as if that's a damn badge of honor. And so President Obama runs and has this conversation with Axelrod, and he lumps Corbyn in. And by lumping Corbyn in, he's lumping in the international left. He's lumping the international left in with the Republican Party, with the GOP, with the right, saying that we are unrealistic in our goals when our goals are pretty succinctly outlined here by Corbyn's spokesperson, which is to take on the tax cheats, create a fairer economy, and a fully single-payer system, to build more homes, and to stop backing illegal wars. That's as close to reality. If it's not realistic to do those things, then we need to change our reality. And the only way we could do that is by challenging these centrist third way Democrats, these global third way politicians who claim to be centrist when their economic policies are closer to Ronald Reagan than FDR. Let's just use that as a measure. Bill Clinton's economic policies, Barack Obama's economic policies are closer to Ronald Reagan than they are FDR. Granted, they try to moderate the excesses of neoliberalism, of capitalism. They want to tax the top 1% more than the Republicans want to tax, but they don't want to change the underlying fundamental structure of the system that not only codifies, but institutionalizes poverty, that goes around the globe and seeks the lowest labor they possibly can and will take slave labor if it's available to them. They're not going to change the exploitative nature of capitalism. They just want to moderate the excesses and say, it's okay for you to be a billionaire, but do you really need to be a 2 times billionaire? So this idea that Barack Obama even represents the center is fundamentally flawed. He represents the center if you're comparing Ronald Reagan with Barack Obama. Okay, yeah, he's more moderate than Ronald Reagan, right? But he's not too far away on tax policy. Well, okay, let me be more accurate, right? So he's clearly not as close to the 1981 tax cuts. He's far away from that. But hell, we came back from the 1981 tax breaks underneath George H.W. Bush and some underneath Reagan. So the Democrats didn't even undo the damage to the progressive tax structure that Ronald Reagan did. That was actually Ronald Reagan, I think, in 1984. And then George H.W. Bush, who ended up losing his election because he broke his campaign promises to read my lips, no new taxes. And he had to raise taxes because of how bad of the economic situation Ronald Reagan left him. So it wasn't even the Democrats who undid the damage from Ronald Reagan. So this entire concept of Democrats being centrist, they are centrist if you have moved the Overton window so far to the right that anything Bernie Sanders and further left is considered extremism. You want to talk about centrism? Let's have a conversation about centrism. If you want to really find the third way, then you have to talk about the competition between two economic opposites, polar opposites, capitalism and Marxism. Let's compare those two and find the center of that, and then maybe we'll call somebody a centrist. But that center is not Barack Obama. And he's dismissing everything else as being unrealistic, when in reality, most Americans can't even afford to live in this reality that we have here in America. Obama, take a vacation, man. Just take the next couple of days off before you say something else that's going to force even me, who has been an unapologetic Obama apologist, to have to come clap at you, man. Go take a break. Go golfing. It's over. Go write a book. Go do some Goldman Sachs speeches. Make a whole lot of money. But let's leave this conversation about the left and right alone, because you're not properly representing it. 857-600-0518 if you want to join the conversation. And I think I'm lying about my phone lines. I honestly don't even know if my phone lines are up right now. So I'm going to take 2 seconds to do that and make sure my phone lines are up, because we're just straight tripping tonight on the show. I don't even have the radio show going. I mean, it's the holiday season, so whatever that means. I don't know if that makes it better. So anyway, we're going to just filibuster here for a second. And I'm going to read some questions from the chat room from the YouTube chat room while I make sure our phone lines are actually up and running as we get this done. And I guess I could fill the empty space with something meaningful, but I guess I just don't feel like it tonight. I just want you guys to sit there for 2 more seconds while, and by 2, I mean like 15 more seconds while I'll fix these phones, the phone lines rather, and then we'll get started. Man, this will be a good place for me to play a commercial. I think I might go back to playing commercials just so I can get a quick breather in between sessions. All right, somebody test my phones, 857-600-0518. I think I have them working. All right, and there it is. Boom, got it working. Caller, You are live on the air. What is your name, comment, and or question?
Benjamin, it's Adriana Langston from Long Beach, California.
Hey,
And
you
when
are
that-
the.
nope.
Well, hang on. Let me properly welcome you to the show. It's good to hear from you. One of my very first, like the very, very, very first producer that worked with the Benjamin Dixon Show. Adriana, how are you?
Merry Christmas to you and your beautiful children and your beautiful wife. I'm
Thank you
doing
so much.
okay.
Same to you. All is well.
So
Thanks for asking.
I want to ask you a question, and then I want to make a comment.
Okay.
My
go for it.
question is, when that Russian military plane was down, it seemed to me they were mighty quick to say, we don't believe this is terrorism. We believe it's something wrong with the plane, malfunction, or pilot error. Typically, when something like this happens, they say, we're keeping all possibilities open until we do a full investigation. And in my mind, I said, is this the retributive act that President Obama said that his administration would do before January 20th at their leisure? And is that why the Russians are so quick to say it's not terrorism, it's pilot error, it's malfunction of the plane, because they don't want anybody looking into how the United States might have been responsible for the downing of that plane. So that's my question.
Oh,
Do you
wow.
think that is the he did say that there was going to be a retributive act, and he did say that it was going to be before January 20th, and the clock is winding down. So I wondered. And it's a military plane, not a civilian plane. I noticed that.
Wow. So
the other
yeah, I mean, I'd have to. I have honestly no take on that whatsoever. I just don't. I don't think. I mean, that's a dangerous game to play. That's my only take. That is a hell of a dangerous game to play. So yeah, go ahead. What's your other comment?
And then my other comment is regarding the UN resolution regarding Israel and how Netanyahu is going to let Trump see some evidence that it was Obama's administration behind the resolution. And my comment is, it's about frickin' time that Obama stopped overprivileging Israel. And he's in a long line of presidents that have been overprivileging Israel. What they're doing is straight up Jew crow, like what the United States did was Jim Crow. And if they finally got called on it by a United States president, I think that would be wonderful. I hope that in order to, quote unquote, embarrass Obama, I hope that Trump makes the evidence that Netanyahu gives him public.
Yeah.
Because if Obamacare gets defeated, and his legacy and Obama's legacy is that he finally stood up to Israel and didn't overprivilege them and co-sign on all the Jew crow stuff that they do, that would be a wonderful legacy. And that's my comment on that.
Adriana, where the hell did you get the term Jew crow? That is like, instead of Jim Crow. Wow.
I made that up because I think they're totally comparable. Oh, and here's the other thing Netanyahu said. No, not Netanyahu, but the ambassador was on All Things Considered this afternoon. And he said that it wasn't, the Palestinians are trying to internationalize the conflict instead of sitting down at the table and doing the actual work of negotiation. And I thought, you know what, Mr. Ambassador, you could kiss my black ass, because that method is exactly what Nelson Mandela did.
Absolutely.
He internationalized it and made South Africa a pariah, and that's what the Palestinians should do, because that method worked for South Africa. Why wouldn't they copy it?
That part I totally agree with you on. There is absolutely nothing incorrect about Palestine making this an international issue or finding solidarity in an international community. That doesn't mean that they're not sitting on the sitting down at the table. That means they're leveraging the political power and the political goodwill that they have for the, like, what's the first time in a generation in my lifetime it's actually okay to say something that's pro-Palestinian, pro-Palestine in America. I mean, this shit just turned the corner in the last couple of years. I mean, a few years ago, you couldn't say anything pro-Palestine. Yeah, I agree with you on that point.
Right.
Yeah.
And here's the thing that scares me, because I have Jewish people in my life that I find so dear. that Netanyahu's administration is getting in bed with Trump, who has white nationalists who are Jew haters in his cabinet, and who is an attractive icon himself to white nationalists. And they don't care. Like, they say that they're homeland for all Jews, but if that were true, they'd be thinking about how their support of this man is affecting Jews at home. Right here in Southern California, where I live, on the news today, there was a report about a synagogue that got smeared with feces. Somebody actually put their hand in poo and smeared it on the windows of this beautiful synagogue. And what I'm saying is when Netanyahu gives validation to Trump and his white nationalist dog whistle, it's the Steins down the street.
Yeah.
It's not Jared Kushner in his Manhattan apartment with Trump's daughter, who with all the bodyguards. They're never going to have to face the music from Mr. Crazy White Man, who wants to hurt Jews. It's the Steins. It's the Rothbergs, who I live by. On the street, the everyday Jew that is going to possibly be hurt or have their synagogue smeared with poo.
Yeah.
And Netanyahu's not even thinking about them. He's not even thinking about who he's getting in bed with. They did this before with Reagan and the Dominionists.
He doesn't. I was going to say, Donald Trump, Adriana, thanks so much for the call. I got the lines you blowing up. I agree with you on that last part. The last 2 points that you made.
Call from unknown caller. To add this caller to your current call, press 5.
No idea.
To accept, press 1. To send a voice.
That's a first for the system. So, okay. So the last 2 points, Donald Trump, Benjamin Netanyahu getting in bed with Donald Trump. When you consider Donald Trump's in bed with the real anti-Semites, right? The very people who genuinely hate Jews, right? It undermines so much of what his stated goals are, in some ways, but then in other ways, it's just par for the course. Right? They're not concerned. And I like the way you make the distinction, right? The distinction between Jared Kushner, Trump's son-in-law, versus the average Jewish American who has to actually live and exist in a space that's not protected from white nationalism and anti-Semitism, right? Those are the people who are going to really feel the blowback of Donald Trump and his white nationalists. But it is ironic that this is not, it's ironic, but it's nothing new, right? So there has always been this intersection, a weird intersection between the hard right in America, which often includes neo-Nazis and white nationalists, and the hard right in Israel. But that's for another day. Okay, next caller. Caller, you're live on the air. What is your name, comment, and or question?
Hello?
Yep, you're live.
Hello? Hi, Ben. This is Vita. How are you?
Doing good,
Happy
Vita.
holidays.
Happy holidays to you. What's on your mind?
I have a couple of questions that's going to connect 3 points. First of all, when we think about Israel and Palestine in terms of a two-state solution, that should not even be said, because a two-state solution is not even possible at this point when you look at the map and the settlements and how they spread it out, how the map is set up in the settlements, where they're located and how they did it. So you can't get a two-state solution when they spread all the way across, because you can't even divide it up back to the first. I think was it 19? The first time when they did the went to the UN, the borders, when they did the borders, it drastically has changed. And then also, I want to connect that to Israel and how they are being oppressors to people that the land, Palestinian land, they were there way before Israel. The Jews came there. So that's a lie that they say in the media propaganda. And then the other thing I want to say is that how they treated Ellison in terms of the Republicans and the Democrats. They do a letter. They have to pledge themselves to Israel in order for them to stay in office to receive the money. Otherwise, they go against them. They'll push them out like they did Cynthia McKinley. Okay, and then in terms of that, of how we're paying our tax dollars and to build these settlements, right? We're actually paying for these settlements because they look like suburbs. I don't know if you ever did some research on them.
Yeah,
and look at the settlements, how the playgrounds and their schools.
Yeah.
And then when we talk about reparations for for Black people, then we say that's everybody goes crazy on it, like, oh no, that's not right. But here we're paying reparations to the Jewish for the Holocaust that happened no longer than maybe 10 years on a foreign soil, and they still are giving money to this day to them. Even when Obama just did the abstain from the UN thing, he promised to give them $38 million for what? They just did that. They've been doing this year round, over and over. And then on every senator and representative, they have to put something on their website saying, making some kind of statement that they're true to Israel.
Yep.
And so that is a big problem for us if we're going to be progressive, because if anything that we want to challenge our representatives are getting bills passed, they're pledged to a foreign entity versus the United States, our citizens, which we vote for them.
Yeah.
You know.
Well, I mean, particularly through AIPAC and their dominating influence in American politics. I mean, they dominate this game. So it's such.
So our votes really don't matter when we try to get things across, like how Schumer did. What Schumer did with the legislation. If we say anything that they consider is supposed to be anti-Semitic, if we don't agree with something, they'll point out facts and truth. Because and then we're supposed to be anti-Semitic, right?
Yep, that's what they say. Anytime you say anything that disagrees with them. Vita, thanks so much for the call. Have to cut it there. I see everybody wants to talk about Israel Palestine tonight. Like 2 callers back to back. Well, if you're interested in talking about this, I have Professor Sikowitz coming on the show tomorrow, and we're going to talk about it in depth, from the UN resolution to the 1967 borders to the 2-state solution. We're just going to do a deep dive. I have opinions of this entire issue based on all the knowledge that I've gathered over the years. But this is one area that I like to appeal to experts on. And when I say, he is most certainly an expert, but he's also a Jewish American who is extremely progressive in many ways. So let's pick this conversation up tomorrow, because I still got like 6 stories I got to get through, but I probably won't. What the hell? Caller, you're live on the air. What's your name? Comment. I'm a glutton for punishment. What's your name, comment, and or question?
Hey, Ben, it's Bryce. What's going on? Well, I won't talk about the Israel thing because it's just depressing. But depressing in the sense of...
I'm sorry, go ahead. Go ahead.
It's just depressing because we're supporting a right-wing government that a lot of Jewish people and some...
Well, you just said, Bryce, I don't mean to cut you off, man. You just said you don't want to talk about it, man. Come on.
Well, let's get to the point.
Okay.
The point is that there's Jewish people that I know that don't support the Jewish government now because it's too right-wing.
Yeah.
It's not, the way it's supposed to be, and they kind of just flip the script. And in terms of reparations, I mean, we give reparations to everybody. Do we deserve it? Yeah, but, I mean, it is what it is. Plus, in our country, we just spend money on too much nonsense anyway. But anyway, the point is, real quick, in terms of the arms race, the arms sales with Trump, well, what do you think is going to be the outcome of all this, of all these countries?
There you go.
Well, what do you think?
Great question. That's a great question, Bryce. I'm so glad you asked, because that takes me right into the story that I wanted to cover tonight. But my audience said, hell no, bitch, you're not talking about that. You're going to talk about Israel Palestine tonight. But to your question on the nuclear arms race, I was reading an article in the New York Times that was discussing Rick Perry and his role in being the Secretary of Energy running the Department of Energy, and the pressure that he is going to feel to begin testing nuclear weapons underground again. This is an interesting story because of the implications and the fecklessness of your boy Rick Perry. Number one, we haven't tested any weapons underground since 1992, I believe. So it's been a very long time since we've done that. And since we've last tested I think North Korea is the only other nation, or I think India and Pakistan tested after that. And then after India and Pakistan, North Korea. Starting to test our weapons again will escalate the likelihood of a true arms race, nuclear arms race, right? And the reason this is even a conversation is because of Donald Trump's positioning and his position, rather, on nuclear arms. It's very likely that somebody like Rick Perry, who does not have any expertise whatsoever in nuclear weapons, nuclear energy, right? His expertise may be in oil because he's from Texas. But in terms of maintaining and protecting our nuclear capabilities, he has zero expertise, whereas I believe our last two Secretary of Energy, they have been physicists. I think one is even a Nobel Prize winning physicist. So, you're going from people who have the expertise to actually understand the conversations that are going on with regard to our nuclear weapons. And when I say understand, able to talk to other scientists in regards to the necessity of doing A, B, and C, and being able to read through, the article actually called it the BS, right? To be able to read through the BS that's coming from somebody versus going to a Rick Perry who couldn't even name the Department of Energy as the third department that he wants to dismantle. So that, on top of the fact that he's going to be getting pressure from Donald Trump to enhance and to increase our nuclear capacity, is very likely, according to this article in the New York Times, to push us as a nation back to testing nuclear weapons, which we haven't done since 1992. That is going to exacerbate the problem in so many more ways. It is going to set a precedent or reset a precedent that is going to cause a nuclear arms race. And you have to actually take a pause and ask yourself the question as to why, right? Like, all of this is 100, everything that we're talking about that have these far-reaching ramifications and implications, it's 100% because of the hubris of Donald Trump. Not out of some strange necessity that we're in a different point in our international order that requires us to enhance our nuclear capacity. No, it's Donald Trump responding to Vladimir Putin and his comments on modernizing their nuclear weapons in Russia. So we're now in a position where actual policy, future policy, dangerous policy is getting ready to take place 100% not out of necessity, but because of Donald Trump's hubris. And that's really kind of the end of the conversation, because there's almost nothing that we can do to stop this, right? Save some legislation from Congress to block it. And I'm not quite sure that Congress is going, particularly a Republican Congress, is going to stop nuclear testing, or going to pass some legislation that will undermine our ability to test nuclear weapons. So here we are. We're on the cusp of a new arms race, a real possibility, depending on how they carry out Donald Trump's, morning mood, right? We have international ramifications being set based off of the unstable mood swings of a man-child. And as succinctly as we could describe his problems, we are equally chained to the ramifications. So the question that the last caller asked was like, what do I think is the natural outcome of this? Just study any arms race in history. All arms races escalate to the point of an actual conflict or an agreement that there's no way we're going to win this. But we've already gone through that process, right? That's what the 80s was about. The 80s was one of the Cold War. That's what the Cold War was about. It was an escalation of arms and tensions to the point where we realized, you know what? Nobody's going to win this game. But you have an unstable man. And when I say unstable, I mean, I think he is mentally and emotionally unstable. No. Let me take that off the plate. I don't think he's mentally unstable as in has mental health issues. I just think that he's so full of himself that he cannot possibly see the danger of leading the country based on his bullshit hubris versus being a stabilizing force in the international community. We may hate everything about Obama's policies. We may hate everything about his economics. We may even hate his foreign policy, but Obama was not threatening the international stability because of his hubris. And I already know people are going to say, well, he was bombing 7 Muslim nations. Yes, he was. And that's something his legacy is going to have to contend with for the rest of our lives, for our generation. What type of president was Obama? But what you cannot say is that he put us in a position that we have to now engage in a nuclear arms race simply because he woke up one morning and thought he would try to measure his dick next to Vladimir Putin. And that's not saying a lot, right? That's not even a compliment. It's just saying we got some fucked up years ahead of us. We'll talk. 857-600-0518 if you want to join the conversation. All right, a couple of more stories to try to crush through in the next 9 minutes. Let's talk about another part of Barack Obama's legacy. 2015. In 2015, America sold over $40 billion in arms throughout the world. Amongst all the nations of the world, the U.S. ranked first in global weapons sales. U.S. arms sales constitute over half of all of the arms sales made in the world. France ranked second, and the majority of the people who purchased these weapons were developing countries. So all of 2015, global arms sales dropped around to, about 80 billion in 2015. In 2014, there was 89 billion in arms sales. Developing nations bought 65 billion in weapons in 2015. You have to pause and think about the priorities of these developing nations. Which nations were they? What conflicts are they in? And why they're investing so much? I mean, the one thing that we won't spend on feeding our communities. We won't spend on educating our communities, but we are going to spend money on fucking killing our neighbors. That's what we're going to do, right? But I digress. That's not the story. So National Secretary Policy Specialist Catherine Theohary, she's the specialist at the Congressional Research Service. She said, quote, this is due in part to the weakened state of the global economy, to concerns over their domestic budget problems. And she stated that, quote, some nations have chosen to limit their purchasing to upgrades of existing systems and to training and support services. The most significant overseas weapon sales for the U.S. last year included agreements with Saudi Arabia, Iraq, Qatar, and South Korea. Overall, the largest buyers of weapons in the developing world were Egypt, Saudi Arabia, South Korea, Pakistan, Israel, and the UAE and Iraq. This is a part of Obama's legacy. Yes, we did drop down by $9 billion, but we still sold over $80 billion in weapons to developing nations. To developing nations. to nations that should be spending their money on economic development. They're spending their money on weapons. And this is the way of the world, right? Sad to say, but this is the way of the world. And this is not only a part of the Obama legacy, but this speaks to the very tight grip that the military industrial complex has on American policy and the American economy. So it's not just Obama's legacy. This is America's legacy. This is the legacy post World War II, probably before World War II, right? But just in my mind, I only sometimes think that far back. But this has been America's legacy for a long time. And it is going to be the legacy of every single president until a president is actually bold enough to come in and change that. And it's not going to be Donald Trump, because he has proven that if he's nothing else, he is establishment through and through. And he's going to continue the swamp instead of draining the swamp. So I guarantee you in 4 years, these weapon sales either would be stable or would have increased at the hands of Donald Trump. 857-600-0518. Caller, you're live on the air. What is your name, comment, and or question? Caller, you're live on the air. All right. Caller is no longer there. Let's keep moving. All right, let's close out with something. It's just as 2016, man. That's all I can say. 2016 has been ruthless. And just yesterday, I was talking about, could we make it another few days, just 4 or 5 more days before the end of this year? Could we make it without losing someone else? And the sad reality is, no, we could not. So today, several days after suffering a heart attack, while on her way to London, Carrie Fisher has passed away. Of course, everyone knows her as Princess Leia in Star Wars. But she was a very outspoken advocate for people with mental health issues. She was very open with her fight being with bipolar disorder. She was very candid and very endearing. I don't know if that's the word I want, but she didn't have to do this, but she made sure that people were comfortable talking about it, even people who don't struggle with it, right? And the reason I say she didn't have to do this was because, it shouldn't be the problem of the person with the sickness or with the disorder to have to make other people be comfortable. But Carrie Fisher, with her comedy, with her levity, with her wit, with her words, with her writing, she did that. So she was far more than just Princess Leia, even though 99% of us will always remember Princess Leia. And that's a conversation in itself. Like, which Princess Leia do you remember? A New Hope? Do you remember Return of the Jedi? The Empire Strikes Back, or the Return of the Jedi? She was a different character in each, right? And she increasingly became like this superior leader, like this woman who could go in and save Han Solo. She was great. She was great. And 2016 couldn't let us keep her. Not only did we lose Carrie Fisher today, we also lost Ricky Harris, the comedian. Some of you may know him from Everybody Hates Chris. It has been, and this is for those of you who don't recognize him, his name by name, this is his face. He died at the age of 54 today. And I'm like, bruh, can we just get a break? Because I started naming names last night about all the people, and I left off some amazing people like that. I just couldn't even think of them all. Maurice White from Earth, Wind and Fire. I forgot to mention him. There's just so many amazingly talented people who have died in 2016, and it feels like we're on a watch. Like we're on pins and needles, wondering who's next. So much so that everybody is commenting on everyone is commenting on the fact that Betty White was trending today. And I'm not gonna lie. I think everyone who saw her name trending felt the same exact way. Like, holy shit, did 2016 get Betty White too? Like, because if 2016 got Betty White, I quit. Like, I don't even want to talk anymore. But she wasn't trending because, thankfully, she has not died. She is still alive. But one of the reasons she's trending is because there is a GoFundMe account. There's a GoFundMe account that has been set up by a man from South Carolina, and he just made another $123. He has a goal of $2,000, and the GoFundMe account is set up to quote, help protect Betty White from 2016. All right, I have to admit, like, in the middle of really sad news, this is brilliant. This is great. I love this. I hope this guy makes this goal. Like, I don't even care. There's nothing he could do to protect her, right? I don't care. It's just the idea. It's funny. It's loving. It's what we need in a year like 2016. But I've got to read his language to you because I really think this guy has got to be black. He said, quote, help 2016 catch these hands. If it goes anywhere near Betty White, if she's okay with it, I will fly to wherever Betty White is and keep her safe until January 1, 2017. Now, assuming she doesn't want a strange Greek standing guard, okay, there you go, guard outside her door, all monies will be donated to Spartanburg Little Theater to help craft new stars of stage and to carry screen to carry the mantle of the legends we have lost this year. So shout out to this dude who set up this GoFundMe account. If nothing else, it made us laugh on a very sad day where we just keep losing, a sad year where we keep losing stars. And I mean, you know, it is what it is, man. That's the way the world is. All right, folks. That's it. We're already 10 o'clock. It's been a pleasure. I will see you tomorrow night with the interview with Professor Max Sikowitz and everything else. I think that's it. See you later.
The Benjamin Dixon Show is only possible with listener support. Go to www.thebenjamindixonshow.com to register for our blog, join the Progressive Army, and support The Benjamin Dixon Show. It's Ben Dixon! If you like this episode, be sure to share, like, and subscribe.
Consider becoming a Patreon. Go to www.patreon.com/The BPD Show and support The Benjamin Dixon Show.